Hello and welcome back to Rev Real Estate School. I'm your host, Michael Montgomery, and today what we're talking about is a really interesting concept called social fitness for real estate agents. Now, when we're discussing this topic, it's probably one of the most important topics when it comes to growing a real estate business. Yet, it's something that oftentimes is very rarely practiced or even discussed. So we're going to start here with a story, and this is a story of a true agent, and he went through a coaching program. Actually, I was speaking to his coach recently, and I was actually in on this call with his coach, and he was getting out of the real estate industry, and we were doing this debrief. Now, him and his coach were working together for about a year. He's been in the industry for a couple of years, and he did everything that his coach said. He was part of this really big coaching organization. He did absolutely everything, and he tracked it too. So he actually had the data to back it up. Now, specifically, this agent is very focused on open houses, on door knocking, on online leads, and geofarming. Those were kind of the four main strategies, as well as social media. This agent, although tried, didn't have the ability to connect with people. And although that was part of what was on his mind and was on his coach's mind, they never actually did anything about it. Instead, it was just, let's hammer more calls, let's knock on more doors, let's host more open houses. And yes, if we increase our numbers, eventually something will end up working out. But can't we make that easier on ourselves? And the answer is yes. It's through social fitness. And as real estate agents, it's very common for us to focus on our scripts or objections or tweak our websites, improve our social media. However, we don't really think about what's at the heart of all of this. And we never work on this concept of social fitness. And now you've probably known agents like this. You've ever met an agent and you're like, wow, this agent doesn't really know what they're doing. Maybe not overly sophisticated, maybe not overly understanding of what's going on in the market, just does not seem like a strong agent, yet seems to list a ton of homes and do a lot of business. What's going on here? Well, the agent's clearly not getting by based on their knowledge, but they're getting by on their social fitness, on their ability to connect with other people. So that's the concept of social fitness. And just like any other fitness routine, we're not just going to get fit by doing nothing and thinking about it. We're going to be getting fit by actually going out and doing some sort of workout. And that's the concept of social fitness. If we can all start to understand the value of social fitness and how we can improve, our conversion's going to go way up. Our prospecting ability is going to go way up. Our enjoyment of our career is going to go way up. And this is a topic that's just not normally discussed. We normally just think, okay, how do we end up getting more calls in or making more follow-up attempts? Instead of thinking, how can we improve our ability to connect with people, which is going to lead to more referrals and lead to more conversions. So this is a topic that is very important for all of us to work on, every single one of us. However, it's never really discussed. It always just kind of floats underneath the radar. When we start to think, okay, well, how do I end up getting more business? And we think, okay, well, I have to kind of tweak my website copy, I have to tweak my email drip campaigns. I have to change what's in my Instagram caption. I have to ask for more reviews. Now, all of these things are going to contribute, but they're not going to have the biggest mover when it comes to our ability to sell more real estate. The biggest mover, like truly the biggest mover, is our ability to connect with people, yet we never really focus on that skill set. And the key word there is skill set. And there's no such thing as a skill that just naturally comes to everybody. Yes, there's certain people that maybe genetically are more skilled in one way and genetically more skilled in another way, but a skill is something that needs to be worked on to be improved. None of us were just born with an understanding of how to do a CMA. We learn that skill over time. And social skills are the exact same way. The only thing is, improving your social skills is the highest lever activity that you can truly do when it comes to improving your skill set. Market knowledge is extremely important. Making sure that we have a great listing presentation is extremely important. But nothing is as important as our ability to connect with people. So how do we go about improving our social fitness? Well, we have two concepts that everybody needs to implement every single week, and you're going to start to see an improvement in your social fitness. We're going to go through those, and then we're going to go through some tips on how to improve your social fitness as you're going through these topics. So the first one is getting out of the house. So this concept, oftentimes we want to know, okay, well, how often do I need to get out of the house? Well, at a minimum, you need to be out of the house twice. And these need to be events. So this isn't just leaving the house to go grocery shopping. These are going to some events. And now if you're saying to yourself, well, I don't know where to go. Well, in many ways, that is oftentimes an excuse because we can find events when it comes to Meetup or Eventbrite or even Facebook groups. There are events going on all the time. However, we talk ourselves out of them all the time. We're going to talk more about that shortly, actually. So we need to be going out to at least 2 events and these events need to be 4+ people twice a week at a minimum. Now, if we want to increase our social fitness at a faster rate, we want to increase that number. However, at a minimum, regardless of where we are, this is kind of just maintenance more than anything. We need to be getting out twice a week to events. Now, on to concept number 2. You've probably heard us talk about this before, but it's the concept of the text twos. The text twos are every working morning, you're sending out 2 outbound text messages. Now, these don't have to be, and in fact, they shouldn't be to buyers and sellers and follow-ups. They can be, but really what this should be is just 2 unsolicited text messages that you're sending to people in your database or people that you want to be in your database. Now, of course, it's cheating if we're sending the same text message or we're sending a text message to the same person every single day. We want to be mixing it up. But what we're doing here is we're forcing ourselves to start conversations. Now, we started our conversations in person because we're going out to events, and now we're starting conversations digitally over text message. Also note those can be DMs as well. So if you're thinking about improving your social fitness, and it's so important, it's such a high leverage activity, then those are the 2 things that we need to be doing at a minimum. Now, when we're actually doing these things, how is it that we're going to be connecting with people? So we have a few topics to jump into here. The first one is be positive and be first. Now, you may have heard us talk about this before. This is a concept that comes from Peter Kaufman. And Peter Kaufman, he's like an amazing speaker and he has these amazing speeches. However, you can't find any of them. In fact, I think you can find one on SoundCloud. And he worked very closely with Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And he has this concept of be positive and be first. And so his whole thing is this concept of people are going to respond to us how we actually approach them. And so we want to be the first and we want to be positive. So what does that actually mean? Well, a great example of this is when you're going to show a house and you're pulling up and the client's there too. When you get out of your car, you need to be the first person to say hello to your buyer, and you need to do so in a positive light. So how do we actually be positive? We're trying to think through this, and it could be we're getting into our own heads. We're going to talk more about that too. But realistically, we need to smile and we need to stand up straight and we need to say hi first with a little bit of energy. And from there, we are now being positive and we're being first. This is a fantastic concept and something that we can use when we're dealing with other agents, when we're dealing with people at events, when we're dealing with clients, when we're dealing with potential clients. It's an extremely powerful concept that's going to improve our ability to connect with people, which moves us to the next topic, and probably one of the more challenging ones, one of the ones that actually takes the longest time, and it's getting out of our head and into the topic. So what do we mean by this? Well, oftentimes we're thinking about how the other person is perceiving us. That's just natural human nature. We're thinking, what does this person think of me? And of course, that is us being up in our head. And it's very hard for us to continue that conversation because we're constantly on guard as to how we're coming across to the other person. So we need to get out of our head, but how do we do that? How do we actually do that? Well, first off, it's not going to happen overnight. It's something that takes a long time, and even with time, it's still going to bubble up at times. But we want to get out of our head and into the topic. So what we mean by that is not focusing on ourselves. Instead, focus on the topic. Focus on the topic of conversation. And with that, that's going to draw us out of our head and towards that topic. And so if we're trying to improve this, again, it's not going to happen overnight, but if we get out of our head and into the topic of discussion, it's going to become a lot easier. Which leads us to our next topic. And our next topic is all about how we're going to continue this conversation. Now, a really good strategy if you're trying to improve your social fitness is this concept of asking questions. Now, we probably know that, but what's a way that we can actually start to work on this to improve our social fitness? Well, we call this no comment until 2 questions. So basically what you're doing here is when you're connecting with somebody at an event, you are not allowed to make a comment until you've asked 2 questions. Now, a lot of us, myself included, as soon as somebody says something, I go right into my own head and think, how does this relate to me? And I try to come up with a topic that could end up working for me. But instead, we need to hit the brakes. We need to ask 2 questions and then we comment. But the comment is important too, because if we're just asking questions, it's going to come across as an interrogation. And that's not necessarily the best conversation either. So we want 2 questions and then a comment. Now, when we're commenting, we need to be using this concept of conversational threading or conversational ammo, we've said before too. Now, how does this work? Instead of us just commenting on something, we need to continue that conversation, and that's done by conversational threading. So let's even say, for example, somebody asks you a very simple question. Where do you live? And let's say you live in a community called Rocky Ridge. So what you could say here is somebody was to say, well, what neck of the woods are you in town? And you say Rocky Ridge. Now that is not conversational threading. Instead, if you were to say, oh, I live in Rocky Ridge. It's a fantastic family-focused community, lots of green space, lots of areas for me to take my dogs, especially off leash. But the part I really like about this is its proximity to the mountains. I can get out of town and I can go hiking really, really easily. And that's what we love to do. Now, of course, you notice the difference there. We gave them a number of opportunities to take that conversation in different directions. It could be family friendly. It could be dog related. It could be green space related. It could be hiking related. So we've conversationally threaded in a number of topics. And by doing this, we're going to improve our social fitness. Again, we need to think of this as a fitness routine. How are we going to get stronger? We're going to get stronger by pushing ourselves, by conversational threading, and of course, these other concepts that we're diving into. Now, the next part when it comes to social fitness is also just improving our ability to be well-rounded. Now, this is actually probably the most fun part of this, and it's how do we actually become more well-rounded so that we can have more interesting conversations and have more interesting things to bring up? Well, we have to do cool stuff. And so this is really the fun part when it comes to social fitness, is we need to basically have more surface area of things that we're doing and interests. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go try everything out there. It just means that you should get an interest in something outside of real estate and follow it and go down that road and learn more about it and then go ahead and do something different. Now, we've also always advocated for this concept of 2 non-consecutive days off per week in real estate. And on those days off is when you can go start to explore new interests, do new things, watch different shows, read different books, go to different events, take a class. Now, in doing all of these things, we're thinking to ourselves, oh, we're just kind of doing that for our own interest's sake. But not only that, we're expanding our interests and we're actually becoming better conversational partners. And so if we want to improve our social fitness, we are going to have to do more cool things. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to, get on a plane and go on some wild vacation. Cool things can just be even taking a different route home, going exploring something in a new community. These can all be things that contribute to our social fitness because with that, that's going to help with our ability for conversational threading as well as no comment until 2 questions. Next, we have to be able to share personal stories or personal information about ourselves. This was actually a huge eye-opener for me in real estate. For a number of years, I never really wanted to talk about myself. I wanted to focus on them. I wanted to focus on the transaction. I wanted to focus on the market. And then one day I started to move more towards telling people a little bit about myself, about my interests, about my home, about what made me choose my home, about what made me choose my neighborhood, about what I do outside of real estate. And then this very interesting switch occurred. And it came to this point where it was less just this client relationship and it was more client, but also a friendly relationship. Now you may be thinking, okay, well, I don't really want to get all friendly with my clients, but here's really the power of it. By becoming more friendly with your clients, it doesn't mean you're hanging out all the time. It just means they see you as an agent, but they also see you as a friend. And once that happens, referrals increase. That's where referrals increase, is when people really start to trust you and see you as a friend. Now, that's not going to happen without us sharing about ourselves and being open about ourselves. And with that, we're going to create more of connection. Generally speaking, where I see issues, though, is people just sharing too much and talking too much. And when that happens, that's where we have to really start to rein it back and be focused on the 2 questions and then a comment. And finally, we need to reach out for small reasons. So this concept of the text twos, this doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be reaching out trying to convert somebody. We shouldn't be at all. We should be open to reaching out for small reasons. And what I would suggest is just use something on your phone, a note-taking app, or even the automatic, voice recording or something like that, where you're just writing down little notes of interesting tidbits that you can share with certain people. And you're not going to use all of these. I just use Siri and I just tell her to remind me of something. And I ask her to remind me the next day. And the next day is when the text twos will occur. And you might just see something that reminds you of a client. Actually, a fantastic agent. He stays in touch with me like crazy and he's so good at it. And really, I was just thinking about his last message. His last message to me was about a new photography company that came into our city and is doing a really good job. Such a great little message, found out a lot about this, and he probably didn't even know he was doing this, but he's reaching out for small reasons which is then creating more connection. So we have to become more comfortable with just reaching out for small reasons. Actually, I have another friend who does this really well, and he just shares funny reels with me. He'll just share a funny reel with me probably once every 2 weeks. He sends me some funny reel, and his message is always LOL. And he's just sharing these really small little funny reels, but it's keeping me connected to him as a friend. And it's the same concept in real estate. We just have to find small reasons to reach out. Thank you very much for watching or listening to this episode. Remember, you can reach out anytime at revrealestateschool.com, or I'm on Instagram at the.michael.montgomery. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next lesson.